Hi, everybody. That was a little behind the scenes of us doing our first Facebook Live from Zoom. So we're using the Zoom technology to connect here, the three of us. We are the global leaders from Tiara International that are talking to you live today. Myself, Betsy Sobeich from Chicago, and we have Elizabeth Ruske, also from the Chicago area, and Andrea Henning, who is in the Netherlands. So we're connected via Zoom, we're coming to you live, and specifically today we're talking about how to lead virtual teams. We are talking about this because we're doing a panel discussion with a panel of experts next week, and then a teleseries on this. A lot of our leadership clients have been asking for advice, tips, tricks on how to lead virtual teams, or even just how to lead virtually. And when we were looking for different experts, one of the things we realized is with Tiara International, we've actually been a virtual team for a decade. And we didn't even mean to really call it that. It's just something we've done. So we thought we would just share our experiences, what we've done that's worked, maybe some mistakes we've made along the way, and see what happens. So I will turn it over now to Beth and Andrea. Maybe start with, what do you think? Like, what are some of the things that you know must be there in order to make a difference virtually or to lead a team from a distance? What are some of the success factors or things that you know work every time?
I think the first thing, Betsy, is that, whenever we talk to our clients about doing things virtually and, and having teams, I'm going to use, for example, like in mentoring programs, when you're pairing up a mentee and a mentor, most people have a default, and it's the old default that they need to be face-to-face or they want to be face-to-face. And they don't realize that you can still have a wonderful relationship and get very, close with somebody and, have and have that, I guess I'd use the word intimate relationship, even if you've never physically met them. And so that's the first thing I would say is, check the belief first is, is it even possible? There's so many of the mentees will say to us, I prefer a mentor in my office. Well, sure, of course you would, but you're not going to be disadvantaged if you can take advantage of the technology that's available today and build the relationship in a different way.
Right, you have access to a whole network of people that you didn't before, and it can feel really personal and have the same level of accountability as the face-to-face used to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Beth, I can add to that when we were starting together, we in the Netherlands and you guys in the States, I realized that in the States, because this country is so big and our country is so small, that we were very much used to having face-to-face. And we were very much behind in experiences in virtually. I mean, maybe it's catching up a little now, but then, so we bumped up against this prejudice big time. And then it was amazing that people trusted us, and afterwards they said, it was sometimes even a more intimate conversation than face-to-face, because you have to be so much present and in the moment. And that was an eye-opener for a lot of people.
I totally forgot about that, but you're right. When we started, we were trying to figure out how to have our teleclasses and our virtual programming, which we've done from the beginning, be available to anyone in the world, right? Because our mission is all women choose to lead their lives from inspiration. So we were looking at how to make that possible. We've always just done the phone call for some of our calls to make it really easy for people to call in. But I do remember for you and Francisca that there were a couple of years where you were like, I don't know if people will really do that. I don't know if we can really lead some of the transformational work that we lead over the phone. And I think we even surprised ourselves those first few years that in 45 minutes to an hour on the phone, where you don't even have the video, if you're really intentional about calling people together, what's the point of the call? What are you going to cover? How you're going to engage people? It can still be a meaningful conversation.
Yeah.
How different are the best practices for virtual teams than like teams that you work with in person? Because I know you guys work with a lot of in-person teams as well. So which things are the same, which things are different?
I think one of the best practices that we honor, and sometimes we honor it a little too long, it's about getting connected, in every meeting, and to start the meeting that way. it's more important virtually that you do that than if you were face to face. I mean, you can get away with it not being as useful or as frequent face to face because you'll have other opportunities. But to start a meeting that's virtual with people around the country, around the world, you really do have to be intentional. One of the best things we've done with a team was that it was a virtual team. We actually rotated who had the connection question. Who was in charge of the connection for this meeting? It can be as simple as what are the 2 words that, describe how you're coming to this meeting, or if time, and depending on how big the team is, hey, what was one great thing that happened last week? What did you do over the weekend that was different? Any question like that is a connecting question, and it puts people in the room together, even if they're not physically in the room.
Yes, and that's something that people can skip even in-person meetings because they feel like time's at a crunch. For those of you just joining us either on the video or on Facebook Live, we're talking about how to lead virtually or how to lead virtual teams. And we just mentioned the importance of connecting. And a lot of times we do that very simply. So I think we should just demo that. Like if we were going to start this part of our conversation right now with a connection question, or a short connection, Beth, what would you ask us and what would that look like?
Oh, I would say, what is one thing you've done this week that surprised you or made you smile? Just really made you happy.
Okay, that's great. Awesome. So if you're listening, answer that question for yourself too, and that might make you feel a little more connected. But Andrea, what would you say to that?
As an answer, there were so many things.
I know.
And I love it. It's even if I make up the questions myself, I always have to think about what would I answer. But I think one of the things that was really, really nice this week was that I had a great connection with my son because we are in the middle of investigating whether we could finance a house for him in Iceland. And what surprised me was how grown up he's handling the whole thing, and how he is totally not attached to the outcome. So even we have come very far right now. And even if it wouldn't work out, he said now we have a nice blueprint. So that made me smile. I think I spend a whole lifetime to get detached once I've been at a certain frontier, and he's there already. So that made me smile. Yeah.
How about you, Betsy?
The thing that was surprising this week is that just coincidentally, because it is the first week of spring here, it really felt like a lot of new ideas and possibilities and connections just kind of sprung forth from beginning the week with going to a new gym and trying a new workout and signing up for a program that I really didn't expect to, going to an event for a new woman-owned theater company on Monday with a new connection friend of mine, and that was really super inspiring. So it just felt like every day there was a little burst of energy toward something new that's going to take shape, and that felt both surprising and really energizing.
Yeah. For me, one of the things that was really, really just delightful this week was I attended a dinner for the Girl Scouts and here in Illinois and Indiana. And they had the girls talk about what Girl Scouts meant for them. And they had a new hashtag My Voice Matters. And 3 girls got up. One was 14, one was 12, and one was 17. And they talked about how they used their voice as a leader to actually change situations that were not right. One was a bullying situation. One was a riot. The kids were trying to get in to see Chance the Rapper, and they thought they had tickets and they didn't. So they were all getting crazy. And, one of them kind of spoke up and, and kind of squelched the situation. And another one was just about, doing the right thing for the right reasons, in her community. And that is just very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. And so for, again, those of you who are just tuning in, we're talking about how to lead virtual teams. And one of the best practices that really, it's an ancient practice to come together and get connected. And it's something we do for our in-person teams. It's something we do with our virtual meetings. Even when time is at a crunch, we might just say, everybody give one word about how they're coming to the call. And we still hear one word from everybody. So everyone's voice is on the phone. We know who's present. People can transition from whatever they're doing to that particular meeting, even if it's just on the telephone. And it makes a world of difference to do that both at the beginning and at the end. Any other best practices that you would want to emphasize?
Betsy, before you move off that, I just want to let you know I had my timer going. That was 3 minutes. That's all it took, 3 minutes to feel connected like that.
Right. Right. And it just makes people feel known. And it also gives you a little window into what's going on for folks, what they've been facing, what their mood is as they come to the call. It's really important. Other best practices for leading virtually or virtual teams?
I think what's really important, and it would be important in every meeting, but it's more important. It is as if everything is just a little bit more important virtually. You have to be more intentional. But one of the things is the multitasking thing. Yeah. It's so easy to mute yourself or to even hide the microphone and then do other stuff. And I mean, we are all tempted to do that. And I think we are all also committed that crime. But it's such a difference to be really, really present and make it then a shorter meeting. Virtual meetings are more exhausting, so make it a shorter meeting, but be fully present there and don't multitask. Yeah, I think that I would say that is a very important thing. What would you say, Beth?
I think that that's also important for the leader, just in particular, to not multitask and be present if that's an expectation you have for everyone else on the call.
Yeah. I think that expectation should be clear, though. I mean, it's not just don't do it. It's, you know, if somebody has a computer open, they should say, hey, my computer's open, this is why, or whatever. You know, I mean, like my computer's open right now because I'm talking to you both. And I was looking at my phone because I was timing us, right? So, things like that. So people aren't wondering, because what happens is once somebody does that, then everybody starts, and then we lose presence, with the group.
And I think the other thing is using the right technology. So video conferencing, which has been made easier and easier, really helps limit the multitasking too, because you can see what people are doing and you can't get away with as much of that as we used to be able to.
Right. Yeah.
But with the technology, the other thing is to just do what's perfect for your team. You don't have to go more complicated or try all the bells and whistles that are out there. You want to do what actually functions for effectiveness for your team. And you as the leader have a good sense of that. Is it a phone call? Is it a video conference? Is it project management, a platform that you want to use to stay connected on tasks? Is it just the Google Drive? You don't have to try everything and you don't have to do everything, but just do what really optimizes effectiveness for your particular group or team. And that's something I think we've done well too. There's been a lot of ideas, out there over the past decade, and we kind of select the ones that feel like they make the biggest difference for us.
Yeah. Especially, there's another factor to factor in when you really lead a global team. Let's say people in China or in remote areas. Like the more complicated your technology is, the better the Wi-Fi needs to be. And frankly, in some areas, it's just not. We have used with a client also Adobe Connect, and we have been very clear in the instructions. Don't put video films in your PowerPoint. It's just will not work. So to put yourself into the shoes of the other person, also with the time difference, like it's just for some people when they have to get up at 3 in the morning and they always have to get up at 3 in the morning, it's also annoying. And we forget about that easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
I was going to say the other thing about, video, it doesn't always have to be video. Like we were talking about early on. Well, the video technology wasn't that great. Skype was not really reliable 12 years ago. But today, there's a lot of options. So, but even still, we won't do video all the time. Sometimes it's just a conference call. But the thing is, you have to have the connection first. There's a way to be connected with people. Once you have the connection, you could do everything. I mean, you could, it's a matter of using the connection or the technology in the different ways to connect at different times too.
Right. One question we've gotten a lot from clients is, how often do you need to meet in person, if at all, if you have a geographically dispersed team and it's so expensive to get together? So how often do you need to meet in person? And can you combine groups who are in person, like virtually, to another group that's in person? And how does some of that work? And I just said that's a question that we get from clients, which we do. We're not right now live responding to questions on Facebook Live because we're using Zoom, and I'm not multitasking between the two platforms, but feel free to ask questions on the Facebook Live comment section, because we will answer those in the comment section there, and then also include them for the panelists that we're going to host at a roundtable next week. So put all your questions there. We'll definitely get to them when we get a chance. But this question, I feel like we get a lot. How often should we meet in person? Do we have to meet in person? It's so expensive.
Yeah, I would say it's a privilege if you can. And I know we make an effort at least once a year. We have a global summit of our leaders where we actually do prioritize that in our budget, and we invest in that. And yes, it's expensive, but we also get a lot out of it. We also don't turn it into a typical meeting, where we actually do go somewhere where we're submerged 24/7 and we get a ton accomplished. So, there's ways to be really smart about that, but I don't think you have to. I would say if you're going to invest, get the biggest bang for your buck, for sure. What about you, Andrea?
It is basically investing in the relationship itself. And now with the good quality video, you could also take time to invest in the relationship, like having also maybe calls with the individuals to talk about who are you. And what we also have done beautifully, and that's part of the adventure and the joy that I like, if you're traveling somewhere for business, for instance, and you know that one of your partners is living there, make an effort to meet them. We have not only our global partners, we also have our coaches, and then we have our ambassadors, and it's just so much joy to see if one of them is going on a business trip to Chicago, that actually they make an effort and you make an effort to host them. And this is part of the relationship building. And for me, frankly, for the fun of living, because accomplishing things, it's great, but it's the experiencing things that really makes me happy.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the things that we do when someone joins our resource circle, which is a virtual community, we do offer to make a phone call to talk to them individually about what attracted them to the program, what they're hoping to get out of it. And I was actually just thinking yesterday that one thing we will do over the next couple of months is, between those of us who are the global leaders, divide up all the members of that group and make sure that everyone gets a phone call, in the next couple of months about how are they, what are they using, what would they like next. And so it doesn't have to be over orchestrated, but this balance between what's a group phone call, what's a meeting, what's an individual connection point, what's an in-person thing, all of those different dimensions help build relationship over time. And when you think about leading virtually or leading a team virtually, that's what you need to do, is create this trust, the relationship, the accountability base, so that you can really operate at a distance. The other thing, I'd flip it a little bit for us too. So what are some mistakes we've made, or common pitfalls, or funny things that have happened? I know that I've done the thing where I thought I was on mute and I'm listening to like one of our teleconferences and I'm like doing my dishes or something, and someone probably goes, "What's all that clattering?" And I'm like, I have no idea. No, I would usually say, "Oh man, that was me." But what else? Any other pitfalls or funny moments when it comes to being virtual or leading a virtual team?
Well, you have to be along the lines of, the mute button and whether or not the mute is on. You have to know how sensitive your microphone is. Because I remember a couple of times being on a conference call, not a video call, a conference call, and I was eating popcorn. And here I thought I was being so quiet, and somebody says, "Whoever is munching, would you stop?" And I had to be like, "Yeah, that's me. Sorry about that."
Right. Well, and I also get paranoid that the camera's on when I don't mean for it to be. So they do sell these little like magnets or stickers that you can put over your camera, just to be double sure that if you don't think you're on video, you're not on video, right?
Yeah, exactly. I realized a time when our first Dutch tiaras were coming in and participating on our conference calls, and they had no clue. So it was always one of them who were very noisy. Oh my God, I have to tell them offline. It's because it's also kind of some rules that you then just take into account naturally from experience. And if you don't have the experience, like sometimes the breathing that is a lot too hard, or they are talking too loud, or all these kind of things. I remember that I felt a little bit embarrassed in the beginning, and it's all a learning curve. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a funny story, and this was years ago that I heard this story, and it's always made me think, relax, because you know what, it's gonna be the way it's gonna be. And it was a woman who was on maternity leave and was working from home, and this was maybe about 10 years ago, so this was before the big virtual office working from home thing really took off. And so she just had a baby, and the baby started screaming. She was on the conference call, and the baby started screaming. She was feeding the baby, and she couldn't get to the mute button fast enough. And she was so hilarious. She said, "Excuse me, my assistant's having a bad day. I'll be right back," and hits the mute button. And that just cracked me up. I'm like, you got to have some humor with this.
Yeah, it's true. And there are pros. So the pros to the virtual environment is that you can work from home. You can have that flexible schedule. You can join people together around the world in a way that it feels like you're really connected. And the flip side is sometimes it's not that elegant the way we do it, whether it's from a parked car or something happens that you don't predict and you're the one leading the meeting. So you have to just be able to roll with it and be able to improv at the same time, for sure. So for anyone who's just tuning in, we are from Tiara International. We are talking about how to lead virtually and lead virtual teams. We've talked about some of the best practices, which are also in a blog we just published. So we'll post the link to that as well. And then we were talking about some of the pitfalls. I think another pitfall is trying to manage people purely by email. So like we said, the best practice is maybe using video if it works, individual or build relationships, show up in person, develop that clear expectation and that foundation of trust. But I hear a lot of people are like, I don't know why I can't manage people from a distance. I sent them an email. And I have one client where I was like, if I hear one more person say I sent them an email as like their thing that they did, and if they're listening, they'll know that I'm talking about them. No, I'm like, I just stop saying I sent an email. Like, what else are you going to do? Are you going to pick up the phone? Have you made a clear request? Is the agreement of how you're going to use email or a project management platform really, really clear? And without that understanding, people can get really frustrated and then they can get irritated and not actually resolve those differences. So what would you say, this will be the last thing I think we talk about before we start to wrap up, but how do people resolve problems if you're at a distance and you're not in the same office day in, day out? How do you know when to let something go? How do you know when to approach it? What's the best practice for that?
I mean, this is very much, that would be the best practice for any team. Like if we have been in team development for quite some time, don't send them an email as one, but also like, don't just let things hang loose. So it's like coming back to whatever might have irritated you and reach out to the other person. But that should also be a team culture that should be established before, and maybe even again, more important in virtual teams, the expectation that you don't just let things sit between you. And the sooner the better, because especially, now with a very good quality of the video, there is a certain amount of body language and everything already there, but often it's not. And so we can also easily misinterpret things. So get back to each other, stay in communication, get it off your chest, have a culture that you can actually express what's going on and ask people and coming to resolve resolutions together.
Right, and to really talk to the person directly, and not to talk about somebody else or whatever, but really to reach out and be like, hey, I just had a question of the last call or the last interaction.
I think, we use the term triangulation a lot. It's easy to, and here's three of us on this call. So if I didn't like the way Betsy did something, I could be talking to Andrea afterwards and be like, come on, like, why didn't she start this call right at 1:15 or whatever? And I'm making that up. but instead of it, first of all, it's direct, right? So you do want to have the direct conversation. But the one thing you can do, and this is in any dialogue, as we're talking about, not just virtual, is when you're saying something, you can say, hey, did that make sense to you? Is that something that you'll support? I think we're, as a society and as a world in our civilization, I think we're getting dangerously close to just telling people things. And I think we have to soften that a little bit and say, hey, did that make sense? Is there alignment on that? How would you improve on that? That's just basic good problem solving. So I do think people need to take that into consideration and remember that. And the other really important thing is, if you do think you're reading something wrong with somebody, as you guys are pointing out, don't let that sit. Pick up the phone, call them and say, hey, I just want to make sure we're square. That isn't probably something you're going to do in the meeting, but that is something you should take offline right away.
Right. And we've all had to do that with each other different times over the past 10 years. And it's not easy to do. So we know it's not the easy thing to do. And sometimes it's just me having a bad day because I came tired or I came late or whatever. And so I can let it go. But having those direct conversations is important. And I would say the other best practice is a facilitation best practice. So on the phone or on a video call, to actually make sure there's enough time for people to share, or to make sure that everyone knows you're going to go around and hear from everybody. Like, what are you thinking? Is there something we're missing? Or, that kind of deal is really important too, so that you don't just rush through a packed agenda, hang up the phone, and not even know how your team is feeling after a conversation, a dialogue, or a meeting. So an agenda that's designed to give room for input, be comfortable with the pause. I know we had to learn that too, right? Like the dead air on a teleconference or a video conference when you say what somebody's, insight, because a lot of times people log in and they want just a presentation because they are multitasking. They have you on the earphones, they're driving. So if you really want to engage your team members, your community virtually, you have to be willing to have that awkward pause and allow for them to jump in.
Yeah, silence can be the kiss of death in a virtual environment. So that's an excellent tip, and I forgot my other point. There was something else I was going to say, but that one trumped it. It was really good.
Well, we are at almost, so go ahead, Andrea, you have another thought?
No, I was just thinking, we are doing this for 10 years already. And I haven't cracked this nut, but we are very connected. And while we have been far away from each other, I think also addressing the process and if we have also tried different formats in there and evaluate that. So don't stick to one format. Have the courage to question, are we on the right track? Does it still serve us, what we are doing? Then crack it open and try something new.
Yeah. I think the comment I was going to make is really a follow-on to Andrea's, and that is that meeting participation, whether it's virtual or in person, is not a spectator sport. You gotta play, you gotta get in the room, and you have to participate fully.
Right, it comes back to personal responsibility, being engaged in everything that you're doing and intentional, which is great. So we've been talking about how to lead virtually and lead virtual teams for about a half an hour. So we're gonna wrap up this particular live broadcast. Like I said, feel free to post questions here because we will reply to them. And then it also gives us an idea of what we want to talk about next week on our virtual roundtable, where we will be featuring some expert panelists who lead virtually and lead virtual teams every day. That will be moderated by Pedro from Tiara and feature a couple of key people we've known for years. So you can find out details and RSVP to that free webinar on our website, which is tiara-leadership.com. So that's tiara-leadership.com. We're following that roundtable up with a 3-session teleseries where we're actually going to practice these things. So all of us who lead virtually or on virtual teams or lead virtual teams will have 3 weeks where we can really amp it up and make improvement in how we're leading from a distance. Anything else to complete? Beth, how are you ending this call?
I'm ending this call engaged. I always love chatting with you guys.
I know. Andrea, how about you? You're ready for your evening there in the Netherlands?
Cheers. Cheers, Andrea.
that's also a benefit of virtual. There's coffee and here's wine because we are in different time zones. So it's Friday evening, and I love this conversation. So thank you. I'm inspired.
Thank you both for being here, and thank all of you who are listening live and listening to the recording. We hope to be connected next week on our roundtable. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.